happened to a man named Trevor in the winter of 2012. He was the kind of guy who liked being alone, a quiet life, away from people, noise, and problems. After losing his job in the city, he chose to move to his family's old hunting cabin in the mountains of western Montana. The cabin sat at the end of a long, unpaved road surrounded by thick pine forest. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Cell reception barely existed out there. The nights were dead silent except for the wind and the distant calls of coyotes. Trevor said the isolation used to calm him, but that winter, the silence started to feel heavy. That night it was snowing hard. It was one of those nights when the wind howled through the trees and the cabin creaked as if it were alive. Trevor was near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, drinking coffee and reading an old paperback novel. His radio was off. The only sounds were the popping of wood and the faint hiss of the storm outside. Then, just after 11:30 p.m., he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. It was soft, deliberate. Trevor froze. Nobody should have been out there. The road leading up to his cabin was nearly buried in snow. He hadn't seen another person in over a week. At first he thought maybe it was an animal bumping against the door, a branch perhaps. But then he heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time 3 slow, steady knocks, like someone trying to get his attention without waking the whole forest. Trevor got up, his boots thudding softly against the old wooden floor. He grabbed his flashlight from the table and moved toward the door, his heartbeat quickening with every step. "Hello?" he called out. "Who's there?" No answer, just the wind. He hesitated, then unlatched the top lock and opened the door a few inches. The beam from his flashlight cut through the falling snow, and there, standing just a few feet away, were 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old. They were completely still. The boy wore a button-up shirt with suspenders. The girl wore a pale blue dress that looked like it belonged in another decade. Their clothes were clean but oddly outdated. Trevor's first thought was that they might have gotten lost. Maybe their car broke down somewhere on the mountain road. But then the boy spoke. "Sir," he said in a completely flat voice, "can we come in? Our parents will be here soon." Something about his tone made Trevor's stomach twist. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. There was no emotion, no inflection, just emptiness. Trevor swallowed. "Where are your parents now?" he asked. "They're coming," the boy replied, his expression unchanged. Trevor's flashlight flickered slightly as the wind picked up. Snow blew across the porch and he noticed something strange. Neither of the kids seemed affected by it. Their clothes didn't move. Their hair didn't blow. Then in that cold yellow light, Trevor saw it. Their eyes black, completely black. No pupils, no whites, just deep, endless darkness. His breath caught in his throat. For a second, he couldn't move. The boy tilted his head slightly. "Sir, can we come in?" Trevor took a step back. I think you should wait outside. I'll call for help." The girl spoke this time, her voice soft and almost a whisper. "Please, it's cold." Her lips barely moved. Her skin was pale, too pale, and Trevor noticed that when she spoke there was no fog in the air. It was well below freezing, but her breath didn't show. That was when pure dread hit him. Something deep in his instincts screamed that something was wrong. He slammed the door shut and locked every latch. Almost immediately, the knocking started again, louder this time. Knock, 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 then silence. Then another set. Knock, knock, knock. "Let us in," the boy's voice said calmly through the door. Trevor didn't answer. He backed away, keeping his flashlight on the door. The voice came again, softer this time. "We can't come in unless you invite us." Those words made his blood run cold. He stumbled backward, tripping over a rug and landing near the fireplace. He sat there shaking and staring at the door. The knocking continued for what felt like an hour, always 3 knocks at a time. Knock, knock, knock. Then, just when he thought it would never stop, it did. The silence was almost worse. Trevor waited. Minutes passed. The fire popped softly behind him. Then, something tapped against the window. He whipped his flashlight toward it. 2 faces stared back through the glass, the same boy and girl. Their skin looked gray now, their eyes darker than before, like holes cut into their faces. Trevor screamed, dropped the flashlight and scrambled to grab his shotgun from the corner. When he looked back at the window, they were gone. He'd awake until sunrise, too terrified to move or even breathe too loudly. When morning finally came, he cautiously opened the door. There were footprints, small, childlike ones, leading away from the porch and out into the snow. But about 15 feet from the cabin, they just stopped. No return tracks, no drag marks. They simply ended. Trevor followed them for a while, his heart still pounding. The prints stopped in the middle of his yard as if the children had vanished into thin air. That was the last night he ever stayed there. He packed up his things and moved out within the week. Later, when he told the story to a local store owner, the man's face went pale. "You saw them too," he said quietly. "Who?" Trevor asked. "The kids," the man whispered. "The ones that knock but don't breathe." This next story happened to a woman named Marlene. In 2018, she lived in a small town in western Kansas, a place where the wind never stops blowing and the roads stretch on forever with nothing but cornfields and darkness on either side. Marlene worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station off Highway 50. It wasn't a busy job. Most nights she'd get a handful of truckers and maybe a few locals passing through. She didn't mind the quiet. In fact, she liked it until one night in early December. That was when she said she stopped believing she was ever really alone there. It was around 2 a.m. The station was silent except for the hum of the refrigerators and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. The wind outside made the glass doors rattle every few minutes. Marlene sat behind the counter, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone when she noticed something: headlights pulling into the parking lot. A black SUV came to a stop by pump number 3. She waited, watching through the security monitor. No one got out. The engine wasn't running, no door opened, no shadow moved. It just sat there, idling silently in the dark. After about a minute, she leaned closer to the monitor and frowned. The windows were tinted so black that she couldn't see inside. Then suddenly, ding, the glass door chimed. The motion sensor went off. She looked up. 2 kids had just walked in, a boy and a girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old. They were both pale, both wearing oversized dark hoodies pulled up over their heads. Their faces looked off somehow. "Hey there," Marlene said, trying to sound casual. "You kids lost or something?" The boy didn't answer right away. He just stared at her from the middle of the store, expressionless. Then he walked slowly toward the counter and said in a flat voice, "Can we use your phone? Our mom's car broke down." Something about the way he said it gave her goosebumps. His tone wasn't scared or upset, it was almost robotic. Yeah, sure." She reached under the counter and picked up the store phone, stretching the cord toward him. But he didn't take it. He just stood there, hands at his sides. The girl stepped up next to him and looked straight at Marlene. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "You have to let us come behind the counter," she said. Marlene blinked. "What?" "No. No one's allowed back here." The girl tilted her head slightly as if she didn't understand. "We can't come in unless you say yes." Marlene frowned. "You're already inside." Neither of them reacted. They just stood there staring. The air in the room felt heavy, almost electric, like the pressure before a lightning strike. Then the light started to flicker. The humming of the ceiling lights grew louder, vibrating, and one of the bulbs popped with a faint spark. The entire station went dark for a split second, and in that moment, Marlene saw their faces clearly in the glow of the emergency lights. Their eyes were black, completely black. No pupils, no whites, just deep, endless voids where their eyes should have been. Marlene gasped and stumbled back, the phone slipping from her hand. When the lights came back on, the kids hadn't moved. They were still staring, perfectly still. Then the boy said softly, "Please, just let us in." Marlene shouted, "Get out!" Her voice cracked with fear. The girl's face twitched slightly as if her expression was trying to form a smile but couldn't. Then both of them turned at the same time, too synchronized, and walked slowly to the door. They didn't run. They didn't speak. They just left. The door chimed again as it shut behind them, and Marlene realized something. The black SUV that had been parked outside was gone. Completely vanished. No headlights driving away. No sound of tires on gravel. Just the wind. She locked the doors immediately and called the police. When the sheriff arrived about 20 minutes later, she was still shaking. They reviewed the security footage together. And that's when everything got worse. On the camera, the door chimed, exactly when Marlene said it did. You could see her reaction. She jumped up, backing away, clearly terrified. But the front of the store? It was empty. No children. No movement. No SUV outside. The sheriff rewound it 3 times, frowning. "Looks like you were alone," he said gently. "Maybe you were just tired. Late-night shifts can play tricks on you." But Marlene knew what she saw. She remembered the sound of the bell, the flicker of the lights, the pitch-black eyes. And there was one more thing, something the cameras did catch. When the lights flickered off for that split second, a reflection appeared in the glass of the front door. Not of Marlene, but 2 dark silhouettes standing just outside, their faces faintly glowing white in the reflection. The sheriff tried to brush it off as a glare, but Marlene could see the shapes clearly, the outline of a boy and a girl. She quit her job the next morning. The owner tried to call her to come pick up her final check, but she never answered. According to a friend, she moved 2 towns over and refused to work another night shift again. She told that friend one last thing before disappearing off social media completely. "Sometimes when I drive past that gas station late at night, I still see that black SUV parked at Pump 3. This final story was posted anonymously online in 2021. The man who wrote it said he had never believed in the paranormal. That changed after what happened one night in his Dallas apartment. He lived alone in a small complex on the edge of the city. It wasn't fancy. It was just a 4-story brick building surrounded by a parking lot and a narrow alley that always smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. His unit was on the 4th floor, right across from the metal fire escape. He said most nights were peaceful. He'd come home from work, feed his cat, and watch TV until he got tired. The only sounds he usually heard at night were the distant hum of traffic and the occasional creak of the old pipes. But on this night, everything felt different. He said the air inside the apartment felt heavy, as if the silence itself was pressing against him. Even his cat Milo seemed tense. He paced the hallway, flicked his tail, and stared at the front door for no reason. It was just after 9 p.m. when the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the apartment as if it came from inside the walls. He frowned and set down his remote. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A kid was standing there. He looked about 9 years old, wearing a red hoodie and jeans. His head was tilted down, hiding his face in the shadow of the hood. At first, the man thought the kid might live in the building. Maybe he was lost or looking for a parent. He unlocked the first latch but kept the chain on. "Hey, buddy," he said through the gap. "You okay? Where are your parents?" The boy lifted his head slightly, but not enough for the man to see his eyes. "They'll be here soon," he said softly. "Can I come in?" "I need to use your phone." The man hesitated. Something about the boy's tone felt strange. It wasn't scared or urgent. It was too calm, too flat. "Where do you live?" he asked. The boy didn't answer. He just repeated, "And can I come in?" The man's cat suddenly hissed, arching its back and scratching violently at the door as if it wanted to escape. That's when cold dread washed over him. Something in his gut told him not to open the door any further. But before he could close it, the boy lifted his face completely, and that's when he saw them. Eyes, entirely black. No whites, no pupils, and just 2 endless voids staring back at him. The man froze, his mind blank with fear. The kid's face was expressionless, but his mouth began to curl into a faint, unnatural smile. The man slammed the door shut and locked it. For a moment, there was silence. Then the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. "Please." The boy's voice came louder this time. "I need to come in." The man's voice shook. "Go away, I'm calling the cops." The knocking stopped. Then a whisper came, so faint he could barely hear it through the door. "They won't find us." The sound of those words made every hair on his neck stand up. He backed away, shaking, grabbed his phone, and called 911. His voice trembled as he explained what happened. The dispatcher told him to stay inside and that an officer was already nearby. He waited by the window, staring at the door, his heart pounding. He could still hear faint movement in the hallway, like small feet shuffling just beyond the wall. When the police finally arrived 10 minutes later, there was no one outside. The hallway was empty, but one of the officers bent down and noticed something. Wet footprints. Small, bare footprints trailing away from the door and down the hall. But when they followed them to the end of the corridor, the prints just stopped. No smudge, no turn. They ended abruptly, as if the person had vanished mid-step. The officers looked uneasy but tried to reassure him. They suggested maybe someone was playing a prank. They said perhaps the moisture from his own shoes created the illusion of prints. but he knew better. The prints were too small and too perfect. He tried to sleep that night, but every time he closed his eyes, he kept seeing that face. Those eyes. He left his bedside lamp on and kept the curtains tightly shut. But around 2 a.m., he woke up to a sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint at first, like rain on glass. Then it got louder and more deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. He froze. The sound came from his bedroom window. That didn't make sense. He lived on the 4th floor. He turned slowly, feeling his stomach drop. The tapping continued. He hesitated for a long moment before finally pulling the curtain back, just enough to peek outside. What he saw made him stumble backward in pure terror. 2 children were standing on the fire escape. One was the same boy in the red hoodie. The other was a girl, slightly older, with long, tangled hair and eyes just as black and lifeless. They both stared straight through the glass, motionless. Their faces were pale, almost gray, faintly illuminated by the flickering streetlight below. The boy's lips moved, but the man couldn't hear the words. Then all at once, both children tilted their heads at the exact same angle, like broken dolls. He screamed and fumbled for his phone, knocking it off the nightstand. When he looked back, they were gone. No sound of footsteps, no shadow, nothing. Just the soft sway of the curtain from where he'd moved it.